The Senate is in session. Senator, Her Honor, Senator Thompson.
Mr. President, thank you for recognizing me. I hope that you will forgive me if I begin by being a little anecdotal, but I have to confess that I had not anticipated, having left national politics, that I would have returned to this place in any capacity, and that in particular I would be standing in this chamber at this time. So I cannot help but observe how interesting life is and how you plan, but how God has other plans, and you have no choice but to fall in. I therefore express gratitude for the fact that I am able once again to return to national service here in Barbados, having served the country at several levels, not just here, but regionally and internationally. And therefore, it gives me great pleasure to frame my comments today in the context of Barbados's development policy and trajectory, and to ask a number of questions, some of which I will attempt to answer myself, and others of which I hope will be answered if I successfully provoke some conversation. I would wish to start, if I may, sir, by observing the passage of time. I recall, sir, as I bowed to your honor a few seconds ago, that it was not, or it appears, not so long ago that you and I and the Prime Minister were the youngest members, along with David Thompson, were the youngest members of this Parliament, and that we were bowing to seniors and looking across the floor at those with gray hair. I observe now my own gray hair, and I remember Prime Minister Sandiford, who was at the time serving when we would have come to Parliament, Branford Tate, Sir Henry, Sir Harold, Sir Richard, Sir Louis, Dame Billy. It really was a distinguished time to serve it was a time to serve with very distinguished names and persons in this Parliament. And so I look across now today at those with black hair and think of the tradition into which they have come, a tradition of service, a tradition of sacrifice, and a tradition of nation building. And it is therefore with an immense sense of gratitude that I feel that I stand, not just having served and continuing to serve, but in the capacity of a runner, despite my unathletic appearance, a runner who is passing the baton to the next generation. It therefore gratified my heart, sir, to listen to the two senators' voice as they spoke, particularly Senator Anduele, as he spoke for the first time, to hear Senator Crystal speak with all her passion and the sincerity and smile on her face, to listen to Senator Lorenzo Herod with his measured but very sound delivery, and to hear the content of Senator Monroe Knight, but most of all, to be moved by the content, the passion, and the quality of the contribution of, Senator Roberts Odell, whose connection from personal experience, the demonstration of vulnerability and connecting it to policy and what policy needs to be was really very interesting. But then to listen to the passion, the content, and the absolute quality of excellence of the delivery of Senator Chantal Monroe-Knight, whom I would not like to speak after in any debate at all. Such was its quality. I have to tell you that my heart sounds, sir, at the political level, at the national level, to see the quality of these young people, to be able to share this forum with them for however long it lasts, and to believe that the Barbados Labour Party, and indeed more importantly, the country, is in sound hands. I wish to congratulate them for delivering what I considered, after many, many years, sir, I hate to count them now, many years as a keen observer and student of politics and as a practitioner of politics, which is what I regard myself, what I thought were some of the best first-time speeches I've heard in any parliament. And I've had an opportunity to observe not just Barbadian parliaments, but parliaments really across this region. So it is against this background that I rise, therefore, to make my own observations in this debate and to say that I do not intend really to drill down into the numbers of the appropriation bill. I want to take what some call a helicopter view and speak to the vision of the appropriation bill and the budget debate and connect it to what our development policy is as a country and a people, and ask ourselves, where is it that we have to go to build a new Republic of Barbados? What are the things that we need to do at the fundamental macro level? What are the absolute policy imperatives that we must not allow to get out of our grasp? And as we placed it in the context of the manifesto, to ask the question, how, in a world that is not sympathetic or empathetic to small island developing states, do we own our own Barbados, own our future, control our destiny, and leave a legacy and history for young Barbadians to follow? Because really that is what the business of nation building is about. You are not building in the moment. You are looking back on what your historical path has been, and you are asking yourself, what are the challenges of the future for which you have to plan? What are the challenges of the future that are going to shape your policy? What are the challenges of the future that are going to impact your people? And what are the challenges of the future that will determine the pathway that a sustainable society, a stable economy, and a happy people, because make no mistake, people must be happy, and they can only be happy within the framework of a society that recognizes their intrinsic value and worth, allows them to reach and maximize their full potential, and an economy that is stable. So this notion that Barbados is more than a society cannot be seen as a standalone, because societies do not exist without stable economies for which there is clear development planning. Societies do not exist without economic sustainability. Societies do not exist unless goods, services, and a vision of themselves as being part of it can be delivered via the fundamentals of the economic solutions that you have put in place for the people in the society. And therefore, I ask three questions. What are the planks of development in the modern world, the era in which we find ourselves? How do we meet and deliver those planks of development for a people whose aspirations and dreams are to have a space, to build out a space, to be seen as larger than themselves, as larger than a micro-state can give and deliver? And if we are able to find those planks, how do we keep them in place? How do we build sustainability? How do we become resilient as a people, as a nation, socially, environmentally, and economically. And in asking myself those questions this morning, I found myself reverting. Perhaps it is a function of aging that one thinks of things past. But I would urge, sir, that in planning for things to come, the understanding of things past, the identification of things present, what is critical, what is pivotal, and what is not, are all essential elements of this plank building that we are doing. And therefore, I said that coming out of the Moyne Commission, coming out of the independence and immediate post-independence period, the governments of the day and the government of the day, a Democratic Labour Party administration, preceded by a Barbados Labour Party administration, identified some planks of development which today we must still pursue and are still pursuing. The first was the education of the populace. It became an essential plank of development. Under the Barbados Labour Party, we went to free secondary education in a limited way. And then the Democratic Labour Party gave comprehensive or universal free secondary education. And this was an important platform on which to start to build our development. Because prior to this, the colonial powers saw development in the context of their development. And the question for them was not how do you educate a people to build a nation, not how do you educate a people to stabilize a society, not how do you educate a people to construct an economy that is sustainable, but how do you get a labor pool, not necessarily well educated, how do you get and maintain a labor pool that can serve your economic and your social interests. And therefore, the first fundamental was to say to Barbadians, we want to educate you to build a nation as a republic, as an independent country. And we start about building schools, primary and secondary education. We started about embarking on what was not called initially the University of the West Indies, but an institution of a tertiary institution, an institution of higher learning, because we understood that our people, when educated, became globally marketable and competitive. Our people, when educated, would turn their talents and skills to the building of the society in which their navel strings were born. So education became the first plank of our development. The next plank of our development was healthcare. It was the norm for people to have multiple kinds of diseases. We haven't gotten to the NCDs yet, but fundamental things that could be helped, could be avoided, could be changed with basic health care. Basic health care in the form of vaccinations against childhood diseases, and basic health care in the provision of polyclinics, as they then became called, but satellite health clinics and satellite health clinics across the country, serving the needs of families of the poor, and investing in primary health care, which is the preventive component of health care. So you aren't waiting for your people to get sick and to break down, and for disease outbreaks, you're doing the intervention at the early stages. Another plank of development, sir, was the construction of physical infrastructure. And let us understand how important this was. You are moving from a colonial construct where the roads are plantation to port, because that is what is serving the economic interests of the monocrop sugar, which is driving the economy for the colonial powers. But as you start to diversify, as you start to look for new planks of development, it therefore becomes imperative to open up your communications or transport system. How do people get into the city? How do people move from one village and one community to another? How do people get around? And how do you move goods and, across the country in a effective way and safe manner? And therefore, the construction of roads and other elements of physical infrastructure. So you are transforming not just the people with education and health, you are taking the physical space now and determining what that space is going to look like and how it can carry the future. So you deal with your physical infrastructure. And then you move to your housing. You come out of a period of slavery where black people, the majority of your population, have no access to housing. You move to chattel housing because they are still tied to a plantation economy where they have to work on the plantations, and since they have no right of ownership, they have to build a chattel house which can be dismantled and moved in a day if on a donkey cart if they are fired from the job, which invariably will happen. So they can't have any attachment to the land. And so the model of the chattel house becomes the model of the housing. And then you have in a previous Barbados Labour Party administration, and I was speaking last weekend in another country, and I was making the point that when you drive through rural Barbados, as opposed to when you drive through rural Africa, other rural communities in the Caribbean, one does not see in Barbados a significant distinction between the quality of housing in rural Barbados and the quality of housing in urban and suburban Barbados. And that happened, again, because of Barbados Labour Party policy, because of the Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act, allowing people to buy land, I think, a dollar something a square foot.
10 cents.
10 cents. Ooh, 10 cents. Yeah, 10 cents a square foot, which then, once you own the land, you can immediately improve your quality of housing, whether you use community effort and build piece by piece and build on, whether you take it to the bank and use it as equity and get a mortgage. So the housing in the country starts to change. So that what the governments of the day were doing were not just building for the present, but anticipating where they wanted to carry Barbados, what kind of people they want, what kind of skills they wanted to invest in for Barbadians, what our physical infrastructure would look like, and then you move, sir, from the agricultural monocrop to some element of diversification. And then you moved into tourism because you recognize that you had something of a brand, a country where people wanted to visit, and therefore you determined that tourism could be a higher foreign exchange earner than agriculture and than a monocrop. And so you start to invest in tourism, and you have then a prime minister taking what was then the Sandy Lane Bennett's plantation out of agricultural production and determining that it had to go into tourism use, and then the Sandy Lane Hotel is built, and the rest, as they say, is history. So therefore, these examples, I think, demonstrate where we are, where we were, and sort of explain how we came to today's point. Then we had family planning, because it was determined that if you had a population which was growing at a rate that you could not sustain and educate, couldn't care for with health, couldn't plan for their housing, you still would be back to square one. So it was determined that a family planning policy had to be part of how we planned our development strategy and structure. And then you had your public health, other public health interventions like your garbage services and so on. It is no accident, sir, that I have started with these particular elements of development, because I am now going to turn, having laid out some historical basis, to move to where we are today, and to say that when you go to the appropriation bill, when you go to the budget, what you are seeing is a prime minister indicating, I am reinforcing these macro fundamentals. I am reinforcing these socio-economic imperatives, and I am building on them. And how is the prime minister and the present administration doing that? First of all, they are saying, we cannot let our road system deteriorate. We have to continue to upgrade and build and modify the road system. And we have to go into the villages and communities where people are still walking with 2 pairs of shoes to get out onto the main road to catch the bus. And we have to change that dynamic so that a little child who is going to secondary school does not know what it is to walk with 2 pairs of shoes, so that they don't know what it is to come through mud tracks. When I came as an MP to St. James South, I found communities that were still like that, but I left them with roads. And that is what the change is intended to effect. You have the administration saying, we have to deal with our storage problems. We cannot have negative reports in the international sphere because we are refusing to manage our storage challenges. We have to have proper garbage collection. We have to have proper bus services. Because if you have poor bus services, you are creating an element not only of impacting productivity in the workplace by preventing people from getting to work on time, taking them to work in a bad mood. You are actually creating risk as people stand by the roadside late at night waiting for buses, waiting for transportation, young girls not able to get home to their parents and so on. So you're dealing with your macro fundamentals. We come back then and we say, but the era of family planning has worked for us. But let us consider now what the new development imperatives are. Population expansion is required. The market is too small. We cannot create economies of scale. We cannot maximize productivity. We cannot expand our production base because our population, those who are buying goods and services in the marketplace, those who are working and contributing to the national insurance scheme, is too narrow a group, and therefore we have to expand our population if in fact we are going to maximize and continue to build some level of economic sustainability. Now the question is, and the debate and discussion has to take place at the national level about how we do that. Do we import labor? And you see that the Barbados Labour Party manifesto of 2021 speaks to the issue of a migrant policy. Do we have to import labor? Singapore, for instance, which is one of the most successful small island developing states, imports labor, but the parameters are very clearly defined. Bermuda imports labor, but the parameters are very clearly defined. Do we expand our population naturally? Do we perpetuate systems like the Barbados Welcome Stamp, where we try to attract high-value individuals who are able then to do further economic investment in the country, who are buying goods and services, who are bringing their skills into the country and contributing to the purchases, to economic activity, and perhaps eventually to the tax pool. So how do we deal with the issue of planning a population? We go then to the issue of our land. I spoke last night about some of our land uses. It is going to be imperative that we continue to invest in agriculture, and the appropriation bill speaks to that, and further mechanization and the use of technology to deliver higher yields and better crops. But we have another problem in agriculture, and it is that because of the traditional stigma and the association of agriculture with slavery and colonialism, that young people are not encouraged to see agriculture as a source of revenue or a career choice when they are in schools. And it is gratifying to know that a number of people are becoming attracted to agriculture. But at the same time, if we are going to build a strong agricultural base, if we are going to build agriculture for food and nutritional security, if we are going to build agriculture which reduces our very high food import bill, not just in Barbados but across the region, then young people have to be encouraged and incentivized to choose agriculture as a career. Moreover, sir, in doing our land use policy, I want to point to the fact that there has not been an agricultural audit and survey since the year 1991. So when we are talking about putting 30,000 acres or 35,000 acres into agricultural production, we really don't know what the state of play, what the current status quo is, and we cannot plan effectively without the data to input into our various models to make the determinations. What percentage of land can we now put in housing? What percentage really can we put in agriculture given modern technology which has higher yields and outputs? What is to be left in open space for recreation, for beauty, for relaxation? And it is in this regard that I'm delighted to see that this administration has taken back up my initiative of the National Botanical Garden, where 254 acres, which were just lying there doing nothing. When you think of what the Chelsea Flower Show does, and the various botanical gardens across the world earn revenues, foreign exchange, are a place of recreation and respite and relaxation and revenue, then you understand what the potential of a national botanical garden. Weddings can be held there. We can have a new old people's or new geriatric hospital there. It has multiple potential purposes, including the protection of flora and fauna and the protection of indigenous species across the country. Our physical planning, sir, we are continuing the physical planning. But now we are moving, and I really want to get to the future, so I'm just doing the framework of the fundamentals. In the terms of health, which is another one of the fundamentals which I identified, our most important policy requirement is to address the issue of the chronic non-communicable diseases, which are the major cause of death and disability in Barbados and the rest of the Caribbean. They impact productivity, they impact quality of life, they impact family life, they impact the workplace, and they really cut people off from having the best quality life that they possibly can. And therefore, a comprehensive policy, and this is why the promotion of wellness, Ministry of Health and Wellness, is so important to our development. It is about going back to that fundamental of primary health care, of the interventive medicine at this stage, because sometimes when you get to the tertiary stage, you can't cure people. So that primary intervention is of critical importance. We know now that superviruses can take out the healthcare systems of even the most sophisticated developed countries and reduce them to doing triaging in car parks and having
emergency technicians determine who lives and who dies. And therefore, a revisioning of your healthcare system to deal with current and future problems. We have strengthened the A&E department and several polyclinics across the country, building out new space. But that space has got to be shaped to deal with the nature of the problems which most likely impact our development. And we know now that these are chronic non-communicable diseases. There are antimicrobials, as the Prime Minister speaks to all the time, and superviruses, or superviri, if people prefer, that we have no natural immunity against and find it difficult to identify preventive measures. Equally, as we deal with the other fundamental, and you realize that I've been dealing with new policy, the way the policy is being developed, why it is being developed, what is underpinning it, the thinking that's underpinning it, and the policy imperative, what the objectives are of the policy formulation. We come then to the issue of education. We are no longer educating a population that is to be a subclass or a labor pool for colonial power. Now we are saying that we want the most competitive, well-trained workforce in the Caribbean and amongst the best in the world. We want our young people to be amongst the sharpest, most technologically savvy, most innovative youth community in the world. And it is regrettable, sir, that there are persons who, within recent times when the matter came before this chamber, did not see the value of having a youth voice in this chamber, did not think that a young person could contribute to the broadening of the democracy and the inclusion of a youth perspective in the national discourse, and did not think that value was to be found in hearing that perspective on the formulation of policy and on issues which are affecting them now and which are going to shape their future. And I hope that with sober reflection over time, a majority of us will come to see that this was not about a single individual with a particular name. It was opening a space for youth in the broadening of our democratic process that allowed us to say to them, you are important. This is no longer the era of being seen and not heard. We see you. We are creating space for you to be seen. And we want to hear what you have to say to us, because your perspective is important and you are our future. And we honor that future by giving you a seat in this sacred place. It was never about a single individual. It was about giving young people a space. And yes, there are 18-year-olds who would have been immature, but surely across the breadth of this land, in the quality of our educational system, could we not find 18-year-olds who can make contributions of the highest quality? Greta Thunberg is not 18 yet. The Suzuki young lady who spoke at the Earth Conference was barely 13 or so when she spoke. And we can identify teenagers across the globe who are contributing to macro discussion, macro policy evolution, who are making contributions not just at the national and regional, but at the global level. Surely one of ours should have been allowed to do the same. What is the point of educating our children and our young people and then saying to them, yeah, but these discussions too high for you. You go on and sit down, let big people talk. I will not labor the point. I want to go to the breadth of the educational policy. Because in the digitization, in the restructuring and the removing of the common entrance, so that we identify the skills, the talents, and the potential of every young person and meet them at the point where they are developing, where they are ready to learn, to progress. so that we train them with critical thinking skills, so that we teach them not just to learn by rote, but to create and to innovate. That is what the educational system is now being crafted to do. We came out of the era of the colonial times. We had education in the era of the independent nation, and now this is the era of the republic, and we are educating young people to stand proud and tall across the globe wherever they are, branded as Barbadians, having had access to the best education possible here in this country and delivering for themselves and for the country at the highest levels. So where we have Rihanna in music, and Juliet, can't remember the scientist's name, dealing with cancer, and the Kaiso gene. Juliet Daniel, Professor Daniel, and so on, that we can replicate that across other disciplines, across other fields, across other specializations. And every time you see them, you hear the name Barbados. I saw on the internet a report from an international report, and it started by saying, tonight's report is on a country that we don't hear about at the international level often, about Rihanna's Barbados. And then they went on to talk about how the tax system was being restructured and the policy interventions which were being made, which is making Barbados a far more competitive place and a good country in which to do business. It was highly laudatory. Every time we position a Barbadian, an educated Barbadian, outside of Barbados, benefits are repatriated to the country. And so the schools of excellence, you do away with your 11 plus. You have a more equitable way, system of assessing young people, understanding that they learn in different ways, at different rates, and at different times. And you then employ your schools of excellence. You put in place your schools of excellence, which will reshape Barbados and the skills taught and the education delivered and training delivered across the entire school system. Sir, I spoke to the traditional planks. How much time is remaining, sir?
Another 22 minutes.
Oh, goody. Thank you. I spoke to the issue then of the fundamentals and the macro fundamentals. I outlined the historical position, and briefly, sir, I just started to speak to where we are today and why. And I want now to speak to other elements of this planning. In housing, sir, and since I was just talking about young people and I previously spoke about housing, I would wish to make the point that this manifesto, and I say this manifesto because if you look at the appropriation bill, sir, if you look at the budget, you will see a very close alignment between what is in the manifesto and what is in the appropriation bill and the budget. Because very early in this term, the administration has already started to deliver on its manifesto commitments, even in the context of growing international challenges. And that is one of the important planks of the appropriations bill, that the appropriations bill seeks at every level, socially, economically, and environmentally, the three pillars of sustainable development. The manifesto seeks to build resilience, which is critical in our defense and protection against exogenous shocks, external shocks, whether those shocks are social, whether those shocks are economic, whether there are environmental as in the case of hurricanes, ash falls, lightning strikes, Elsa. Economic, as we saw with the coronavirus, where your whole economy, the major foreign exchange earner, has virtually come to a halt as a consequence of the closure of borders and restrictions on travel. Socially, where a virus not originating in our country can affect every aspect of social life and mental health. Because part of the challenge that we've had with the coronavirus, and someone spoke to it yesterday, I believe, is that well-being has been undermined, and there has been high suicide ideation amongst young people, amongst young women and young men. Not just actual suicidal ideation, but actual suicides at a larger number, and people suffering from depression, older people suffering from depression, men feeling a sense of a loss of their capacity to earn and to look after their families, and women in households having the challenge of not knowing how to care for their children and literally not knowing where the next meal is going to come from. And this is where the value of the household mitigation unit has been so high. But we have to start to deal with mental health and the mental health challenges arising out of the COVID virus. As somebody who has had COVID, and it is no secret that very early, now 2 years ago, sir, I think it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, in May, almost exactly 2 years ago, I came into Barbados and was shocked to learn that I was positive for COVID. At the time, people did not even understand that you could be completely asymptomatic and still have a high viral load, as was my case. But the point I'm making is this. Two things. First of all, that in planning our health care, it is time. We have dealt with mental health in various ways over the years, but Barbados has no written mental health policy. And the time has come to address mental health and have a mental health policy in Barbados. We know what we do. You treat people, some go some are institutionalized, some are medicated, some are treated in the home setting. But what really is an optimal way to deal with mental health issues? That is something that has to be determined. We grow up here, oh, don't mind she mad, or he mad. We say that without necessarily taking the family member for treatment or calling somebody into the village to make the necessary intervention with the neighbor who has started to get all real funny in the last few days, and so on. But what COVID has done is created mental health issues from children and young people to adults. There is a high level of stigmatization with COVID, that even after 2 years, I can tell you, sir, that I walk up to people and they start to back to tighten their mask, and they don't even realize they're doing it. Some people look completely panicked. There are people who would not invite me into their homes or would not come near to me after I came out of Harrison Point. There were people who they would see me and take a wide berth or wave at me in the distance. People who would normally come up and hug and kiss. Not that I was expecting to hug and kiss. The point I'm making is that it is a highly stigmatized disease, and what we now have is a community of stigmatized persons, because households have had members, whole families have come down with it. We have had people who have died from it, people who have lost income from it, people who are grappling with long COVID. I can identify pre-COVID Liz Thompson and post-COVID Liz Thompson. I can see and feel the difference not only on my body but on my mind. They talk about the cloud fog that you get after COVID. I mean, I can speak to it, but the point that I want to make is this. If we are planning for new diseases and emerging diseases, Part of the planning that has to take place is for the mental health and mental well-being of those who have been afflicted in some way. Because people who have not gotten COVID have ended up with depression from being on lockdown for long, long periods. And therefore, there should now be, I think, some level of community counseling and programs, particularly for children who have lost family members, who lost their grandmother, saw the grandmother taken away from home with people in PPE, and never saw them again, never was able to have a conversation with them, to feel their warm flesh, to be hugged and kissed. And there are a lot of people out there struggling with the impacts of COVID, the stigmatization of COVID, the mental health illnesses that derive from COVID, and they are not getting the help they need, even in middle-income households, because mental illness is so highly stigmatized and so much a taboo issue still. So I want to make an appeal in the planning of our health care that we should address these issues. And I got to that point, sir, because I had been talking about housing. It is important in addressing our housing needs, and I'm speaking to how the budget, how the appropriation bill has positively impacted the fundamentals of our planks, our development planks. And two things have happened that I think are significant. First of all, the intervention that is committed to give young people a lump sum to allow them to purchase a first home. Home ownership and ownership of a piece of the rock has been an aspiration of Barbadians for decades. You come out of a people who are allowed to own nothing, particularly the land on which you work. And therefore, when you can, you want to be able to afford some of it. And that commitment to give first-time homeowners financial help to enable property ownership is critical. But the reduction of land taxes down to on the first $300,000 will not only ease those who already own property by taking out that block. You no longer have to pay tax on that first $300,000. But for people who are buying a first home, perhaps not some of the people in here who are people of means and substance, but persons who are buying a first home, the house does not often go over $300,000. And therefore, many, many people in Barbados will now pay no land taxes at all. And in terms of reducing household expenditure, having increased disposable income, and putting property ownership more firmly into the grasp of cohorts of people who would not previously have afforded it. This is a critical step. But there is a new development plank, sir, and I turn now to what for me is part of the most interesting component of the appropriation bill. There is a new development plank that the Prime Minister has laid down firmly in these estimates and in her budget, and it is environment as a plank of development. We have spoken before about environmental issues in the context of protecting the national and the natural patrimony, and that is important, our air, our lands, our waters. These fields and hills our national anthem speaks to, these fields and hills which are now our own, and therefore policy has been concerned at some level with protecting our fields and hills. But we have not asked ourselves, what is the economic value of the ecosystem called Barbados? How do we ensure we maximize that economic value while at the same time do not so overexploit it that we jeopardize the economic gains which we are getting from our ecosystems and natural surfaces? And therefore, the Prime Minister is very clearly saying that she is addressing a number of issues which deal with ownership. And ownership of our Barbados is a critical part of it. She has indicated in the budget and and by extension in the estimates when you look at the financial allocations, that there has to be a build-out on one hand and a protection on the other hand of our environmental patrimony as a nation. And that environment therefore becomes now a plank of development. And how so? For the first time, a country had, and what was amongst the first in the world, to have a ministry of blue economy, where we recognize that under the blue economy, our fishing fleet has to be migrated, as a previous Labour Party government did, migrated from the old Moseses to refrigerated boats. And I know that Senator Harewood, with his connections at Oyston and the fishing industry, understands, and you, sir, having served a constituency that had a large fishing community at Silver Sands, I had the privilege of going fishing with the fishermen at Silver Sands. And they thought I was joking when I told them I would join them on a fishing expedition one morning.
I suspect the privilege was theirs.
Pardon?
I suspect the privilege was theirs. You said you had the privilege, and I'm saying on their behalf, I'm sure the privilege was theirs to have gone fishing with you.
Well, sir, in those days I was a little slimmer and I had to wear a swimsuit, and it was fellas, so I mean, I didn't think that I was hard on the eye. So I said to them, well, I want to go fishing with you. And they laughed. They didn't take me seriously. They said, all right, you meet us here tomorrow morning at 5:45. I got there before them, and they were a little surprised. They looked around at each other. And they said, mistress, the boat out there, you got to swim out to it. I said, no problem, let's go. So I swam out to the boat with them, and I spent a day fishing with the men from Silver Sands. And there was a particular, you lose touch with people over time when I migrated, but there was a fisherman by the name of Stephen who became a very good friend of mine.
Mine as well.
And there was a shop where very good food was had after the fishing event. But, sir, I become anecdotal, and I say that is always a sign of aging. So let me get back to the substance of the issues and forget the anecdotes for the moment. The point I'm making here, though, is that you have a ministry of blue economy. And this is important because the next frontier of economic exploitation is going to be the marine environment for minerals, for resources, for oil and gas, for a variety of things, maintaining fishing stocks, your flora and fauna, marine flora and fauna. So it is critical that you don't just treat to blue economy issues or marine issues in a tangential way, but that you deal with them frontally, evolving the policy necessary to build out your future. In fact, if one considers, for instance, the amount of dolphin skin or fish skin that is thrown away when it could be used for fish meal, when it could be used for other bringing economic value. I have seen leather made from dolphin skin that was absolutely amazingly beautiful, that I could easily have worn a pair of shoes. It is a waste product in Barbados. And we have to learn how to look for things that we consider waste and build revenue earning, and use them as revenue earning resources. Another element in which that can be done, and I would like to urge the Ministry of Blue Economy, is in the sargassum seaweed. We speak of it as an irritant or as a nuisance, when in fact, to me, we are not maximizing our resources. We have a resource called Rihanna. Beg your pardon. We have a resource called the Right Excellent Rihanna. And the Right Excellent Rihanna is one of the most sought after global brands. She has a makeup line called Fenty Beauty. Why do we not invite the Right Excellent Rihanna to partner with Barbados in creating jobs, collecting the seaweed, and doing two things with it. And given the popularity of her brand, the rate at which her products sell, we may not even be able to produce enough seaweed or to collect enough seaweed to give her. There are two clear uses for seaweed that we are not utilizing. One is as a feedstock for cows. Livestock, cows, are some of the greatest contributors to greenhouse gassing because of the rumination and the gases they give off, and so as they in their eating process. But it is proven that when seaweed is added or makes up a principal ingredient of their food, then they don't have the same degree of gas production. So if you think of livestock across the globe and the significant contribution to greenhouse gases, then if you consider how adding seaweed into the feed would transform that, immediately you see where it can be a resource. Now, Rihanna is not into livestock farming or production of animal feed, but other companies are. And once we are able to give the raw material or a value-added material, then there is opportunity for foreign exchange earning. And rather than dumping the seaweed or asking what we can do with it, it immediately creates jobs and becomes a valuable resource. Seaweed is also an excellent component of some brands of makeup. And Fenty Beauty can have a sargassum seaweed line with seaweed mined or collected across the Caribbean. We need to think out of the box and open ourselves to the engineering of new solutions. New solutions in which we identify things that have been problems and determine how we turn them into value-added goods, how we turn them into the delivery of jobs and foreign exchange for the country. So I just want to introduce that into the discussion because that is something where I think there is tremendous potential, but we are currently not utilizing. And so the Prime Minister is saying, I am going to reduce the country's ecological footprint by moving towards renewable energy. So we will have solar farms and wind, and in the future wind energy, and we will look to how we can utilize our ocean energy. There's been talk about OTEC. I do not feel that we need to be wedded to OTEC or that we need to pursue OTEC. What we have to do is to look for the best ocean technology that is emerging and align ourselves with that. And in fact, Barbados can be used as a test bed for new energy systems, especially energy systems which are scaled and suited to small island developing states. And what the estimates are seeking to do is not just shrink the ecological footprint, but to say that we want to transform the lives of people by giving them renewable energy, A, and B, allowing it to become a source of income for a household that needs the money. A source of income that will help to supplement your disposable income. A source of income or passive income because you don't actually have to go out and do anything to earn it. As long as the sun shines, the energy is being generated. And as long as the energy is being generated, you can sell it to the plant or you can reduce your own income, your own expenditure. And what is significant about this? It's two things. First of all, not only is it creating new industry in Barbados and new jobs, and for those who have done the analyses and the reading, you would know that green energy investment is outstripping investment in fossil fuel energy across the globe. That green jobs are being created at a rapid rate, and that renewable energy and green technologies are creating decent work. What the people involved in the labor movement and the industrial relations climate call decent work for people at every level. So this economy can now start to create scores and hundreds of new jobs for a new generation of people at various skill levels. And you add that then to two other things that are being done through the appropriations. The development of a cannabis industry. The development of a foreign exchange earner which can create a strong revenue stream for Barbados. I know, and in addition, and I'm talking about how we are using our green patrimony. Equally, and I'm sure that Senator Cummings is going to speak to this, so I will not seek to steal her thunder, but just to mention that the transition then to community-based tourism is of critical importance here. Because what we are saying to the tourists is, not only are we giving you a new immersive experience in Barbados with locals, but that we are allowing you to experience the natural environment at a different level. So that community-based tourism is primarily environmentally based. Look at Oystons, next to the beach. Old-time dancing. So I can't dance, but I like to watch them moving around the floor. Well, I can dance the calypso and things like that, but that other stuff is outside the scope of my skill, sir, but I know it may not be outside of yours, and again, I become anecdotal. Now, the importance of the cannabis industry, and the renewable energy are twofold. First, we are creating new industry and new forms of income and foreign exchange earning. But second, and most important, is that we are stopping the development of industries on an us and them basis, where you have the owners being people out there and people from over and away and from people who don't look like the majority of us, and transferring it now into the hands of average Barbadians to give them a larger stake in the economy and new sources of wealth. And this is where the appropriation bill and the budget are so strong. That what the Prime Minister and the government are saying is that we saw industries develop before in which we had no stake as a majority black population. But this party, this administration is creating new industries that will bring new wealth to families, new wealth to individuals, that will lift people out of poverty and bring to the country a new prosperity. And that is where the difference is being made. That is where the appropriation bill is being so transformational. This is where the green patrimony now is coming in along with the traditional development planks, the fundamentals which she is undergirding and shoring up, the planting and the placement of new development planks built on the natural patrimony. And in this regard, sir, I know that there is only about a minute remaining to me, sir. And in this regard, I don't have a lot of time, but I would wish then to turn and make the point as to why it is that Barbados's attempt to address issues relating to climate change are so important, and why the Prime Minister's advocacy at the international level isn't just about personal attention for her. It is about raising an issue that is existential to people in Barbados, the Caribbean, and small island states. When we built, and again, it was another project that I had the honor of leading as minister, the boardwalk. The boardwalk was not built for beauty. The boardwalk was built to stabilize. It was an innovative way of stabilizing a beach that we were losing and dealing with a climate change. It was an engineering solution to a climate change problem which has social and economic benefits and spill-offs. And that is what this administration is attempting to do. It is saying we have a problem with climate change. We must adapt, we must mitigate, but we must engineer social, economic, and environmental solutions. And at the national, international level, we must advocate. So when the Prime Minister talks about getting the international community to address this, we are not doing it as beggars going cap in hand. We are going to the international community and saying that there is a principle in law which says that the polluters pay, and you are the polluters, and we are therefore asking you to pay by creating financial instruments like the use of SDRs. And I don't have the time to elaborate, I regret, but perhaps in another debate we can deal with this at greater length. What we want is a space and a place for our people and for our nation, and we need the fiscal space to be able to continue to deliver on these fundamental aspects of society, economy, and environment. But we start, sir, with the building, the upshoring of the traditional development planks and the building out and placement, the placement and building out of new planks of development, development that will define not our colonial existence, not our post-independence existence, but development that will define the future of the Republic for citizens who are 18 and over and younger, for Barbadians yet unborn. And I am happy, sir, to be part of this debate and this administration, which is creating the future Barbados and ensuring that we own our future. I'm much obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Senator Thompson. And I invite you to take the chair at this time.
Oh, we're not in committee. Okay. Okay. Natural ground, please. Senator Malalu.
Let's get that right. Madam Deputy President, thank you for recognizing me. Let me start by expressing my thanks and gratitude to all those who have seen it in me that I would be fit to serve in this chamber. I appreciate the confidence that they have shown in me, and I will do all that I can to serve to the best of my ability. I will serve as an independent fashion, and I will do so with the help of the guiding hand of the Almighty. It is not lost on me that I'm the grandson of a priest. Humble beginnings. And I hope that when you see me and you listen to me, that is all you will see, is a Barbadian, a fellow Barbadian, and nothing more. I have been astonished, frankly, in the last few weeks, that that is not the first thing that people generally comment to me when they look at me. And I think Barbados needs to move past that. That is not what I see. It's not what I see in you. Certainly not the first thing. And I hope it is never a thing that you see. So I'm humbled to serve here, and I hope that what you will see is a fellow Barbadian seeking to serve and do the best that I can do. Thank you. While I submitted my notice of absence in advance for the second sitting, which was last week, due to my travel commitments, I want to apologize to you, all my fellow senators, for not being here. I would have wanted to be here, but I do have a significant travel schedule that takes me out of Barbados, representing the country in other ways. And I apologize for what happened for that last week, and I apologize for what will happen in the future again, I'm sure. But I hope that that travel and the experiences that I gain overseas help me in the contributions I can make here and will be of value to the country. I also would like to apologize in advance if I raise matters that have already been well ventilated in my absence last week. And to be quite honest, I was not expecting upon my return late yesterday evening that the Senate was still meeting. So in some ways I feel unprepared, Madam President, for my first speech, if I may say so, in Senate. But I think I'll have a second opportunity, considering that this is not really our home, and our home is across the road. So I will say that my maiden speech will happen in the normal chamber. Now, some of you may know me, and you know what to expect. Others will not, first time. I will say to you that I will be direct. I will choose my words to get my points across very succinctly. There will be no long talk from me. So with those few words, I have three things I would like to speak to on the appropriation bill. I shall start, I think, by quoting Winston Churchill, who told us that to improve is to change, and so to be perfect is to change often. And I do hope that the few comments that I will make on the appropriation bill might in fact lead to change. It might not. Firstly, taxation. Taxation is an interesting thing. I want to start by saying that as a parent, we've all been a child. Some of us are now parents or will be parents. We will understand that structure drives behavior. Structure drives behavior. We all knew it. Certainly I knew it very well when I was in secondary school. That's what I can remember. The structure that teacher gave you in that class drove the behavior of the students in the class. We all know it as parents with our children. You give them structure and they behave a certain way. Structure can also be designed to encourage and discourage certain behaviors, and that is what we do with taxation. We do it often. We tax sugary drinks, for example, to discourage from drinking them. We tax perhaps tobacco to discourage that as well. And then in other cases we remove taxes to encourage it, like the green energy that was talked about and other things. But from a business point of view, taxation needs to be certain. Uncertainty for businesses is an extremely bad environment. Businesses do not make investments in uncertain environments. We must do all we can to provide businesses with certainty. And my concern as I speak to the appropriations bill is the retroactive nature of the tax that is being imposed upon certain industries. And I appreciate that it has been discussed that the tax will be paid in the future, but it is calculated on results of the past. And that creates an environment of uncertainty, which I think is unwise within the business community. I think also that particular tax is unfair. It does not recognize that there are businesses in other sectors not addressed, which may have been more resilient or may, in fact, have benefited from the pandemic. I give as an example one that I am well familiar with. An industry that did not exist before the pandemic. That was the industry of PCR testing. At a time when, at one point, we were testing 3,000 people per day. We were struggling to reopen our tourism economy. People were coming back, but we were requiring tests of people incoming and waiting on their results. It was a difficult time. Many private businesses were formed out of that. And at that time, they were charging $300 per PCR. If 1/4 of those 3,000 people per day were tested privately, that was $225,000 per day in revenue. Per day, Madam Deputy President, per day. So we never know where one might profit in a pandemic, and I'm not saying that they did it intentionally or with any bad motive. We needed it. What I'm saying is it did happen. PPE was needed, and many entrepreneurs set about and did a good job. There was many things that needed to happen, and certain businesses did, in fact, prosper as a result of the pandemic, not in a malicious way. Let me be clear, not in a malicious way. They were doing the best they could. Having said that, this tax, therefore, to me, this pandemic levy, it does not address this fact that was there. It singles out a few particular industries, a few particular players in one industry. That does not seem fair to me. I would have preferred that we were all in this together. And it is clear that if you have made profit, you could afford to pay some more tax. And I think, personally, that all the businesses should have been asked to play a part, not just some in certain industries that we might think have avoided the worst of it, because we frankly did not know who benefited, who was resilient enough, etc. So I support completely the notion of a pandemic levy that would get us to pay back what it cost us during that period in the quickest possible time, so that we do not leave this pandemic as a legacy for generations to come, but we deal with it now. And in that way, I believe the proposal is correct, but I believe the proposal is unfair in addressing only certain industries and certain players within those industries. I leave this point and ask you, who is next? If we accept that we can retroactively determine a tax, who is next? At the end of next year, if something else changes, is it a shopkeeper that we shall tax more retroactively or calculate it retroactively? Is it okay because it's these particular industries, but it's not, well, okay for others? The principle, to me, is not right. I move then to the electric vehicles. Again, as I started out by saying, structure drives behavior, and I think this is an excellent idea that we are structuring our taxation so as to promote behaviors which we want, which is the change into electric vehicles, which is the direction that the world is going. I am concerned, though, that we need to recognize what's actually happening in the world and with these electric vehicles. And wearing another hat, I do have an opportunity to see what is being done in these areas. The truth is that there is more demand for electric vehicles in the world than there is supply, than there is capacity for. And I want you to remember that we in Barbados sit in a little small country of right-hand drive vehicles. Generally speaking, we are not a big market that any manufacturer is saying, I wonder what Barbados wants in terms of its vehicle, what would be good for them. We get a vehicle that was made for some other right-hand drive country, whether it be Japan or New Zealand or Australia, a lot of the former Commonwealth countries, England, etc. And then we have to down-spec it to something that we can afford here. So the manufacturers around the world of EV vehicles, there is higher demand than there is supply. So they're going to sell those vehicles to the countries that can afford to buy them first. There's no manufacturer, I can guarantee you, who is today thinking, how do I design an EV car for Barbados? That's not happening. So what has happened is that industry within Barbados started out really as buying cars from other markets, mainly the United Kingdom, and I think we saw it in the form of the Nissan Leaf originally, was being bought there from dealerships. It was destined for the UK, tax, etc., was paid in the UK, and then it was exported to Barbados, and that's what started the first of those few cars. Since then, as far as I'm aware, there's only 3 manufacturers who are directly dealing with EV vehicles into Barbados. I won't call their names, but as far as I know, there are 3. But what this bill seems to ignore is that there is much more availability of technology within the hybrid industry. And this ignores the hybrids and does not give preferential tax treatment to the hybrids. And I think that that is a failing, and I hope that that will be addressed. For Barbados, the infrastructure to support internal combustion engines, being fuel, etc., all of that exists. If we were, by some magic wand tomorrow, able to change every vehicle that we had in Barbados to be in an electric vehicle, the country would come to a grinding halt. We do not have the electrical infrastructure to charge all of these vehicles. We need time to do it. And the hybrid technology saves us 35 to 40% of the fuel it uses and gives us a chance to catch up. So I think that it would be my opinion that we should, the bill should have addressed in a broader fashion the hybrid vehicles as well as the electric vehicles. Lastly, I would like to pick up on just one thing that my fellow senator, now sitting in the chair, Deputy President, mentioned, which is on education. And I will finish on this. When I entered that great institution on Crumpton Street, Harrison College, I believe fully, and what I saw was that education was equal for everyone. I had a very, very good friend, who I will not embarrass him by calling his name, who lived in my neighborhood. My dad had a car and would drop me to school, so we would take him to school. His dad did not have a car. He relied on the bus. But we got the same education. He became an accountant. I became an accountant. He flourished within an accounting firm. I flourished within an accounting firm. I am absolutely, so we wore the same uniform every day. We went to the canteen or we brought lunch. When we were within those walls, we received the same education. We were the same. 40 years to the day, my first son attended Harrison College. And then 1 year later, his younger brother attended Harrison College. Unfortunately, and this is not about Harrison College, it's about generally, I would say that our education system had changed significantly because their education system needed to be supplemented with after-school classes and this teacher and the next teacher, and if you could afford it and if your parents could afford to take you to those lessons, then you could do it, and it had changed. And I am deeply concerned deeply concerned that we need to get back to that free education that is the same for everyone and provides everyone with the same opportunities. And coming through this pandemic, what I have seen, the difference between the private schools, how they have been able to pivot and react, and how the public schools have been able to pivot and react, I am embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. My eldest son, he had only 4 months of the pandemic, from March through to whenever the CXCs were finished. My youngest son had all of fourth form and then fifth form again. But what I saw within the private schools and how they were able to pivot and how they enforced discipline, it was difficult, and it is extremely difficult, and I'm very worried about that generation. But we did not do a good job, and we have to make it up for that generation, those 2 years, and we need to spend a lot of time and a lot of effort on those kids. So with those few words, as I said, on those few matters, I felt somewhat unprepared today because I didn't know I was going to be here, but I hope that they will be useful to you all, and I look forward to serving with you all in time. I'm obliged to you.
Mr. President, Madam Deputy President, I'm sorry.
Senator Cummins.
I rise on this occasion to sum up and to close this estimates debate in the Senate. The first estimates debate, or rather I should say the appropriations bill, debate on the appropriations bill incorporating the estimates of expenditure for financial year 2022-2023. But Madam President, I believe I must begin my comments by saying, perhaps as you did, but from a different perspective, how honored I am to be here. I remember first meeting you, Deputy President, as a young officer, and you were Minister of Environment at the time. And we traveled to a meeting in China, I believe it was, under the World Bank Global Environment Facility. And I have watched you and your career since then in awe and absolute admiration. You know this privately, and I wish to put it on a record publicly, Madam Deputy President. But beyond you, and my privilege being here to serve alongside you now, here in the Senate, you as our Deputy President, I wish to turn my primary source of attention to my colleagues who sit on this side. I want to use, perhaps Senator Nichols may be in a position to correct me if I don't use it correctly. But I want to use a cricketing analogy, Madam Deputy President, because we've just come out of cricket over the past few days. When we are having developmental sessions, Mr. President, in cricket, and Senator Nichols over many years would have done this, and many others I know, and he knows that we both know jointly, we have a second division team, we have an intermediate team, we have a first division team, all in pursuit of ultimately being able to produce a high number of professional cricketers. I am proud, Madam Deputy President, to lead the government side which constitutes the representatives of the Barbados Labour Party government in the Senate. They, in my view, make a strong statement to the country that this Barbados Labour Party administration has a strong second division team, a strong intermediate team, a strong first division team, and a ton of professional teams that have come through and have historically led this political party in each successive administration. Madam Deputy President, the fact that we have a strong intermediate team is reflected in the number of youth leaders that constitute the development of the Barbados Labour Party, and I want to place on the record that it is a commitment of this administration under the leadership of our Prime Minister to be in a position to recognize those second division and those intermediate teams, those youth teams that come along behind us, Mr. President, Madam Deputy President, so that in the same way that you made reference to passing the baton on to many of those who come behind you, that we too who stand here today are in a position to pass the baton on to others who will come in the other divisions that are preparing at this time for leadership. Madam Deputy President, I had occasion over the course of the last couple of days also to reaffirm the commitment to the Barbados Labour Party and this administration to those youth teams coming behind us. And as we talked about education, and Senator Malalu in his commentary just now on the education system and his own experience with education, I had the opportunity, Madam Deputy President, to look historically at someone who all of Barbados knows and knows by first name. Who is Malala? The world's most well-known advocate on education and education for youth and education for girls. When she wrote her first blog, Madam Deputy President, she was 12 years old. When she began to be interviewed by news media, BBC, and others all around the world, she was 15 years old. When she was shot for being a major global advocate for education for girls, Madam Deputy President, she was 17 years old. When she was transferred into the United Kingdom to be able to recover, she then was able to benefit from a scholarship to Oxford University. She was the world's youngest global laureate, and she talked about education. She talked about access to education. We talk about her in a country that is reticent or unsure about whether an 18-year-old can join us in the Senate, Madam Deputy President. I am not sure how we reconcile that, but I want to begin my commentary by saying to the people of Barbados that this Barbados Labour Party administration, with a strong side that has shown itself approved to sit here in the Senate, is committed to giving voice and agency and validity without ambiguity, or in some instances, Madam President, without the contradiction of being able to recognize that Malala could be a Nobel laureate and at 17 years old be invited to Canada, receive honorary Canadian citizenship, and be invited to address the House of Commons, the lower house at that, Madam Deputy President, not even the upper house. Yet, in the same country, while we laud that, we are unclear about whether or not a person at her own age, of our own hue, who looks like us, can serve in this space. It is a painful day that we would practice such contradictions, Madam President, and put it in the public space while we celebrate others who don't belong to us. But this administration, Madam Deputy President, as we go through the appropriations bill, you will see a range of initiatives that cover from technology and science, robotics programming, reform of the education system, investments in life sciences that allow for young people who have a future that was not what our past was, to be able to craft a developmental path for our nation that is built on the basis of growth, on the basis of transformation, on the basis of the development to which you spoke, Madam Deputy President, and it crafts a future that positions our nation in a community of nations around the globe that we can compete and stand tall with others all around the rest of the world. Madam Deputy President, when we look at these estimates of expenditure in the appropriations bill, we see in the actual document that we are speaking to the grant of $1.8 billion or so. And this I want to make reference to, Madam Deputy President, as it relates to the overall estimates of expenditure for this financial year. Madam Deputy President, you and all of the colleagues here spoke in great detail, in brilliantly detailed technical terms about what was contained in the estimates of expenditure. We talked, Madam Deputy President, around things including, in the case of Senator Maynard, about water use and access to water use in Barbados and how that was treated to in the estimates and as a policy measure. Senator Haynes, in her presentation, spoke extensively about health, access to health care, persons with special needs, in particular children with special needs, and the importance of an aging population having specializations in geriatric medicine. Senator Boyce, in his maiden presentation, a brilliant maiden presentation, spoke about youth inclusion and in particular, youth with disabilities. And then we had Senators John King and Senators Pat Paris also speaking in particular about issues relating to culture as well as people empowerment. These are all, in principle, Mr. President, Madam Deputy President. I need to remember to say Madam Deputy President and not the default of Madam Mr. President. Madam Deputy President, these are all the kinds of developmental programs that as a government we understand are critical to our own development trajectory. But then we went on to speak, Madam Deputy President, in Senator Lorenzo Harewood's comments on agriculture and the developmental role needed to be played by agriculture. We talked in Senator Boyce's comments about things relating to gas and water rates and renewable energy, as was the case with Senator Malalou, and then, of course, some of the points that were made by Senator Nurse. But I want to contextualize my closing of the discussion on the appropriations bill, Madam Deputy President, in the context of estimates of expenditure and estimates of revenue. There has to be that balance to which we spoke and to which I spoke in my opening remarks about growth versus social services. You made reference, Madam Deputy President, about the economy and the society, and our newest addition to the Senate chamber spoke in great detail about the importance of contextualizing all of that within a legal framework of rights, as well as recognition for different categories of workers, in particular prison officers, teachers, and so on. Now, if you look at the estimates of expenditure, Madam Deputy President, we are being asked to approve $1.8 billion for this financial year. This represents this non-statutory expenditure that we are expected to take responsibility for during the course of this year. What am I talking about when I say non-statutory expenditure? The non-statutory expenditure, Madam Deputy President, relates to all of the things which are exclusive of salaries and wages and recurring expenses. But then we have the statutory expenses, Mr. President, Madam Deputy President, and it brings a total estimates of expenditure for this financial year as a government to $3.7 billion. That is what we are spending versus what we are approving during the course of the financial year. The estimates of revenue, Madam Deputy President, project that we are meant to earn $3.2 billion, and there is meant to be a shortfall, Madam Deputy President, of approximately $528 million. Now, where does that $528 million come from? It comes from the budgetary statement and proposals that the Prime Minister spoke about in the other place last week. It allows us to capture that shortfall in expenditure that says we have a growth agenda, we have a developmental agenda, we have a social agenda, we have a legal agenda, and there is a shortfall, a deficit of $528 million. And so while many of the measures may be discussed as to whether they're right or fair or just, I think ultimately at their most basic, Madam Deputy President, we have to be able to share with our public that there is a direct correlation between what government earns and what government spends, how government generates growth and revenue, and how government is able to invest in social services. When we talk, Madam Deputy President, about the ability to collect garbage, when we talk, Madam Deputy President, about the ability of people to get from home to school and home to work on buses when they do not have cars, Madam Deputy President, the kinds of things that we're talking about, Madam Deputy President, are the things that are captured in a shortfall, in a deficit in revenue and expenditure. They are the things that all of us, whether we are at the top of the income bracket or at the bottom of the income bracket, that we all require as social services. So a government cannot always agree to give all of the things in a given financial year that we may want. Neither can it always agree, Madam Deputy President, to do all of the things that as a society we may need to have happen in the given financial year, because just like in our household, we have to manage what our income looks like versus what our budgets for spending looks like. So we may not be able to buy all the things that we want to buy in the supermarket. We may need to go with a list. And so the estimates of expenditure in its most basic form represents that list of things that we are going to be spending resources on, as opposed to the things that we would like to have overall. But it also outlines, Madam Deputy President, the future visioning of the government of Barbados by projecting outwards to 2023 to 2024, to 2024 to 2025, which says we may not be able to do it all now. But let's talk about how we can do it and program it for the next financial year once we're able to reach our revenue targets. We are also able to say sometimes, Madam Deputy President, as we go through the estimates, that there has to be that balance that is part of the conversation in the public space between government having the revenue from the consolidated fund, government reducing or raising taxes, because that's how government raises funds, and then alternately, Madam Deputy President, our debt to GDP ratio. So government has, in these estimates of expenditure in great detail, outlined, and you will see it in the respective tables, tables 3 and tables 8 are positively correlated, and they outline for us where government is drawing on revenue to be able to spend money from whether it is from the consolidated fund, whether it is from grant financing from development partners with whom you, Madam Deputy President, are very familiar, and many of the partners in here, Senator Chantal Monroe-Knight would also be familiar about how we treat to grant financing, whether we are able to procure those funds from debt financing, Madam Deputy President, or whether we are going to be treating to how we deal with that a little later on down the line because we can't afford to do it right now. That is what constitutes these estimates of expenditure, Madam Deputy President, and they reflect the commitment of the government of Barbados to create that balance between the economy and the society, between growth and economic development and the provision of social services, between ensuring that the business community can grow and thrive and that those persons who are the most vulnerable in our communities can also be provided for. These estimates of expenditure reflect that delicate balancing act, Madam Deputy President. We're all voices, and I believe that the Senator Dr. Haynes, when she spoke, she talked about all voices must contend. All voices must contend, but all voices subsequently have to be coalesced within the framework of an estimates framework and a national framework where no single voice becomes dominant, but that all of the interests of all people are balanced within that visioning and within that development framework, and there is provision made for those who cannot do for themselves above all else. And that, Madam Deputy President, is what is before us to approve, and I would wish to move on that basis, Madam Deputy President, that this bill do now pass.
Joe.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question is that this bill be now read a second time. Okay.
Madam Deputy President, this bill has been certified as a money bill.
Question is that this bill be now read a second time. Those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Madam Deputy President, this bill has been certified as a money bill, and I beg to move that this bill do not be read a third time.
Question is that the bill be now read a third time. All in favor, please say aye. Those against, say no. We think the ayes have it.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be certified as the
Cited.
and be cited as the Appropriations Act 2020.
2020.
22 to 2023.
The question is that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Appropriations Bill 2020 to 2022 to 2023. No? And be cited as the Appropriations Act 2022 to 2023. Those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it.
Order number 3, ma'am. In the name of the Honorable Leader of the House, to move the second reading of the final appropriation 2018 to 2019 Bill 2022.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to ask your permission for us to treat to the final appropriation bills, the items number 3, 4, and 5 on the order paper as a cognate debate.
Permission granted.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move the second reading of the appropriations bills captured in order paper 3, 4, and 5.
The question is that we do now have the second reading of the appropriations bill, items 3, 4, and 5 on the order paper. Those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it.
In the name of the Honorable Leader of the House, I'm sorry.
Madam Deputy President, I wish to advise that the final appropriations bill 2018 to 2019 has been certified as a money bill, and on that basis, I wish to move for a third reading of this bill.
The question is that the appropriation bill 2019 to 2020, 18 to 19, be read a third time. Those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Appropriation Bill 2018 to 2019, Appropriation Act 2018 to 2019.
The question is that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Appropriation Act 2018 to 2019. Those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. So the question is that the, right. The question is that the final appropriation 2018-2019 Act 2022 do now pass. Those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. That bill do now pass and be so cited. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Order number 4 now, ma'am. In the name of the Honorable Leader of the House, to move the second reading of the final appropriation 2019 to 2020 Bill 2022.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that this bill now be read a second time.
The question is that the final appropriation 2019 to 2020 Bill 2022 be now read a second time. Those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Deputy President, this bill has been certified as a money bill, and I beg to move that this now be read a third time.
Question is that the final appropriation 2019 to 2020 bill 2022 be now read a third time. Those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the final appropriation 2019 to 2020 Act 2022.
The question is that this bill, the final appropriation 2019 to 2020 bill 2022, do now pass and be cited as the final appropriation 2019 to 2020 Act 2022 do now pass. Those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it.
Order number 5, in the name of the Honorable Leader of the House, to move the second reading of the final appropriation 2020 to 2021 Bill 2022.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move the second reading of the final appropriation 2020 to 2021 Bill 2022.
The question is that we have the second reading of the final appropriation 2020 to 2021 Bill 2022. Those in favor, please say aye. Those against, say no. The ayes have it.
Madam Deputy President, this bill has also been certified as a money bill, and I beg to move that it move to a third reading.
The question is that the final appropriation 2020 to 2021 Bill 2022 be now read a third time. Those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Deputy President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as a final appropriation 2020 to 2021 Act of 2022.
The question is that this bill do now pass and be cited as the final appropriation 2020 to 2021 Act 2022 do now pass. Those in favor, please say aye. Those in favor, please say no. The ayes have it.
Madam Deputy President, this now brings to a close the government's business for the day. We have spent 3 days in this place. We've returned to our home, and we have been here in discussions over the last 3 days, and I wish to express my appreciation to all of the honorable members. I know it is a sacrifice of time in service to the nation and in service to our legislative agenda, and I want to invite you to join us for lunch in due course during the course of today, but I beg to move that the sitting do now be suspended, sine die. Be adjourned, sine die.
The question is that this session be now adjourned, sine die. Those in favor, please say yea, and those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This session is adjourned, sine die.